I would just ask you to keep your microphones muted during the presentation. And then there will be a section for questions and answers where we invite you to unmute and to join either by typing in the chat or by asking your questions directly. So welcome. It's a pleasure for me to be able to give you this presentation on systems thinking, my findings, my ideas, after about 20 years of being in contact with systems thinking. So I more or less look at it as an attitude than a discipline, because systems thinking by definition, it's a trans-discipline, it's a meta-discipline. It's a way of connecting different disciplines. So for me, it's more an attitude towards life, towards making observations, towards attributing meaning to these observations. So before we start with the presentation, I'm going to quickly give you an overview about my background. I started as an industrial engineer and worked as an industrial engineer. I came to EPFL in 2009 and started my PhD there, which was in conjunction between management and engineering. And I started applying some ideas from systems thinking, a field that I had become acquainted with during my bachelor's studies. So in EPFL, I tried to use systems thinking for generation of a set of techniques and tools for assisting managers in decision-making processes. Then I went to the quantitative side of systems thinking, which is called system dynamics. After my PhD at EPFL, I did a second master's degree in system dynamics, which is the quant side, the mathematical side of systems thinking. It's about the simulation of complex and adaptive systems and understanding different modes of behavior that could emerge from such systems. I was working at the same time in a project, which was an urban dynamics project. It was understanding a city as a system of systems. We were working on a city simulator for the city of London. And at some point, I was a little bit disappointed with the limitations of the mathematical or the scientific approach, especially when it comes to understanding human activity systems and socio-technical systems in which we have very pronounced presence of the human factors. So that was my beginning of experimentation with depth psychology. And soon after, I realized that I needed to deepen my understanding in depth psychology. And now for 3 years, I've been studying depth psychology or analytical psychology at Jung Institute near Zurich. And starting from this summer, I'll be starting my practice as a psychoanalyst. So in this presentation, I'm going to combine different ideas from different fields, from management, from psychoanalysis, from literature. So it's going to be a multidisciplinary take on systems thinking. And I'm a consultant and educator. I teach in different programs at different universities. I also teach at the MBA program at EPFL. And very recently, I started an initiative, a company, an education and consulting company called Design Dissolve, which is about the intersection between design thinking and systems thinking. So the paradigm that I call systemic design for creation of products and services in a systemic way. So this is an overview about me. And now we get started with the ideas about systems thinking and what is this and why does it matter? That's the first thing we want to think about and talk about. So it's about the importance of thinking in systems. Why is it important to think in systems? To understand this better, you should understand the structure of our psyche a little bit. Our psyche is in contact with two different types of objects. We have outer objects that we are very familiar with, like a building, like, for instance, a course, like a car, like a molecule, like many other things that are tangible and are perceptible through our sensory perceptions. And at the same time, we have inner objects. These are objects like dreams, visions, fantasies, right? Ideals, ideas, some some stuff that come to us not through our sensory perceptions. They are actually somehow in the background. They come from a different world. And to connect to the world of outer objects, we use our sensation function. Our sensation function helps us in understanding the outer object, the outer world. To connect to the inner world, we use our intuition. So intuition is the function through which we can establish a relationship and somehow apprehend the nature of the inner objects that exist. So why is it important that we're talking about this distinction, sensation versus intuition? I just show you a couple of things. This is a painting from 16th century, and this is the beginning of the, let's say, explorations and the beginning of the scientific method trying to conquer the mindset of the individuals. I would like to ask those who have not muted their microphones to please mute their microphones so that we don't have any background noise. Thank you so much. So this painting shows this, let's say, paradigm shift very clearly. We can see these two French ambassadors that are covered by items of outer objects. You know, we have musical instruments, scientific items, globes, books about mathematics, and you know, you cannot see an inch of this painting that is not covered by something. This is the moment that we started paying a lot of attention to the outer objects, to the stuff that is out there, right? And engaging our sensation function a lot. We have a similar way of approaching things now, you know, but the nature of the outer objects have changed. You know, you see on LinkedIn profiles, people put a lot of, let's say, different qualifications, certificates, and they're gathering a lot of these things that are all about achieving something and in understanding about the outer world. If you look at the academia, you know, the number of disciplines are rising. You know, this is an outdated statistic, but it shows that there's 8,000 different disciplines, 50,000 different academic journals, and around 20 million articles published annually. So this shows that things are we are going through a hyper specialization. We want to branch out, develop more and more categorizations and classifications to understand things better. So the other difference between the inner world and the outer world is that in inner world we see continuity, we see coherence, and we see connections. But in the outer world, there's a lot about silos, classifications, and understanding things in very detail. So we can see that there's two different sorts of movements we can imagine. There's a movement towards connectivity and finding combinations and interrelationships. On the other hand, there's a movement that targets specializing, isolating, separation. So these two movements are also congruent with the two functions that I told you about. Sensation, which is all about understanding things in more and more detail, perceiving things in more and more, let's say, concrete or clearly defined dimensions. And at the same time, we have a movement which is about creating connectivity and combining ideas. So now, why is this important? If you look at the insight from psychoanalysis, you see that our psyche seeks coherence, continuity, and connectivity. You know, it doesn't like forming compartments. You know, in psychoanalysis, when there is different compartments in the psyche that are somehow autonomous and they're functioning autonomously, you say that person has neurosis. So it's basically a pathology of the psyche. This is some insight from Mary-Louise von Franz, renowned psychoanalyst, who says that a sign of a decaying civilization is that you see a lot of compartments. Each compartment has got their own rules of behavior. It's got its own worldviews and values, and everything is kept very neatly apart. So the compartments are very neatly apart from one another. And he says we can see that. She says we can see that in the behavior of individuals. If you go and ask a businessman who behaves like a shark, or a salesman who behaves like a shark from Monday to Friday, why do you do that? And then on Sunday he goes to church. So how do you put going to church and your behavior at work together? He says, well, that is work. This is religion. You know, everyone behaves like this at work. So this compartmentalization is basically a plague to the continuity of our psyche. So which shows that we have to pay more attention to that inner world, of intuition, in which there is connectivity, coherence, and connections across ideas, and that faculty or capacity to create those connections, basically. So we can also see it in our lives a lot, that we do something for the money, and then our interest, our basically passion lies somewhere else. So there is a division between work. There's a division between work and learning. Sometimes we're not learning much in our work. There's a division between work, learning, and passion or enthusiasm, and or entertainment, or so things are compartmentalized. And this is basically why we need an attitude of creating connections. And this is what I'll be talking about today. And if you go to the root of the word health, you see that the word health comes from the same root as the word wholeness. And this is another important concept for us to bear in mind. So this integration and connections across things, and consistency contributes to health, to our wholeness, basically. And in German, those of you who are German speakers, you know that when you go to a doctor, he or she may ask you, what's missing? It means what is stopping you from being whole and thereby being healthy. One more example, the word nature. It's funny to know that this word does not exist amongst indigenous people, because the definition of the word points to the fact that there is a siloed way of looking at the world. There is man-made, there is human and what the human creates, and then there is stuff that nature creates. And for the primitive man, this does not make any sense. They don't have any word for nature, because nature is everywhere. When you talk about compartments, we can see a lot of these compartments around us right now. Now, if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, you see that they are compartmentalized in 17 different categories. Each one is neatly kept apart from the others. So each one has got its own logo, its own color, and its own sub-goals. Whereas we should think that the real leverage lies in the connections across these 17, let's say, fields, or 17 different areas that exist. You cannot touch one without touching the others. Change in one will precipitate a chain reaction of change in others as well. That is something we're not paying attention to. You can see it in our tools that we are using. All our tools look more or less similar. They're all about compartmentalizing, breaking things down. And there is more and more of these tools that are coming into use, and in business, in entrepreneurship, in design thinking. You see every day there's a canvas that is born. So these are some dimensions of fragmentalization, compartmentalization, and looking at things in siloed ways. In my courses, I do an experiment with my students. I give them a bunch of kaplas, which is building blocks for creating things like structures. And then I give them also 2 bottles of water, big ones, and I ask them to build a bridge that allows for the bottles to pass underneath it, and at the same time can support the weight of the bottles. What we see always is that students very quickly build the pillars up, and then they ask, okay, how can we connect this? So I tell them, well, the bridge is the connection. So we are very good at building pillars up. We're very good at analyzing things, diving deep into something and breaking it down into its elements. But when it comes to creating connections, we really lack that faculty in us. And I've seen it a lot in my students and in the way things are being handled in education as well. And once that you tell them this, that they have to think about creating the connections at the same time that they're putting the first brick down, then they understand that they need a different mindset and they can create results that are substantially different. So this is an interlude to Act One. And in Act One, I want to make you familiar with one, let's say, technique, or let's say exercise that can help us towards developing our attitude of systems thinking, or being able to think in systems. Now, what is this exercise? You know, we all know these type of games and exercises that we have to find differences. This is also engaging our sensation function, find the differences between things. There's 12 of them. And then once you find a difference, you don't learn anything out of it. So we are very good at finding the differences, but what we want to talk about today is finding similarities. So here we find differences across seemingly similar things. I want us to find similarities across seemingly different things or phenomena. This is going to be one exercise that we can start doing to build that attitude up. Now, I give you an example. These are examples from fairy tales, or some of them are more modern, some of them go back in time. They are very different. At the same time, there is something very substantial about a similarity that connects them all together. And when I realized that similarity across these seemingly different fairy tales, it was a very important moment for me, because I said, wow, it cannot be coincidental that they are different in this substantial way. There's a meaningful, subtle difference there. The difference, that there's a meaningful, subtle similarity across them. And it's so subtle to realize this. In one word, the similarity across these, despite all their differences, is that in all of them, there is an absence of the feminine energy. The mother of the hero or the heroine is missing. She's not there. Either she's dead, or disappeared, or we don't know, no one talks about her, or so on and so forth. So this was a very powerful realization for me that got me started. One of the powerful realizations that got me started in my explorations in the field of psychoanalysis. Okay, what does it entail? How is it that there is this similarity across all these, no matter where they come from, when they were created, there is an underlying theme that connects them. At the same time, I saw that in the hero's journey, there's also some parallels between these heroic, let's say, quests that exist. So I was studying one in Iran. My father was a professor of Persian literature, so I was familiar with Persian literature from a young age. And the first labor of the hero is fighting with the lion. At the same time, we have the 12 labors of Hercules. The first labor of Hercules is also the lion. So, oh wow, they are centuries apart, thousands of miles apart. How is it that these parallels exist? So these are some questions that got me started into psychoanalysis, and this is some examples of looking for similarities across seemingly different things. Between Greek myth and Persian myth, many things are different, perhaps, but there is a meaningful similarity that we should dive deeper into and understand why that similarity exists. So soon after, I was familiar with Joseph Campbell's monomyth. So, well, there is this notion of the heroic journey that we can see across stories, across, let's say, movies and so on and so forth. Any famous movie follows somehow this structure that he describes, that it starts with an ordinary world, and then there is a dive deep into the unknown world. There's a fight with the forces of darkness. At the beginning, the hero is not powerful enough to overcome those forces. He has to learn something fundamental, transform himself so that he can conquer those forces, and then he comes back triumphant with an elixir or a boon and then the next cycle of this journey starts. Then very soon I realized that our planet follows the same journey. We start from 21st of June or 20th of June, where we have the brightest days, and afterwards the length of the days reduces, the length of the nights increases until they're equal towards autumn, and then we go to the depth of darkness, in which we reach the longest night of the year. And we have, again, beginning of spring, in which we have equal length for days and nights, and again another cycle of the planet starts. And I saw that there is basically traditions and festivities across the world that are coinciding with these dates. For instance, in Iran we have our New Year. I'm originally from Iran, and in Iran our New Year begins at the moment of equinox, which is the moment the hero returns from his journey and has conquered the forces of darkness, and is again the length of the nights and the days are equal, but from this point on the nights are going to get longer. And I realized that the Christmas tree bears a lot of resemblances to another tradition or cultural festivity we have in Iran, which we celebrate the longest night of the year, and in which we put together fruit from different color, which are different fruit of the same color, which are mainly red. And I saw the parallel between the red color of the fruit and the red decorations on the Christmas tree and all this brightness and light. I realized that, wow, this is basically a celebration of light conquering darkness. It's as if there's a sun coming up in the background and we can see the rays of the sun passing through the branches of the Christmas tree. So it's basically a celebration of a rebirth of the sun after conquering the forces of darkness. So for me, that similarity between those different mythical themes got me started on a journey of discovery and finding a series of connections, following this rabbit hole down and finding more and more ideas and connections. And it was a very invigorating journey, basically. Now, I'm doing that in my personal life as well. I constantly think, amongst the movies that I like, for instance, why do I like these movies? What is the connecting thread that runs through all of them, despite their differences? This is 4 of my favorite movies. We have The Third Man Up There, Night of the Hunter, Apocalypse Now, and 2001: A Space Odyssey, from different directors, from different eras, in different genres, different actors, everything about them is different. But I'm asking myself, what is it about them that connects them to you? And at some point I realized that, thanks to a friend of mine, that there is an aesthetic dimension here that is the common denominator of all these movies. So there's something inside me looking for aesthetically pleasing cinematic experience, in addition to basically all the different elements that are happening. So this is our first contact with a way of building an attitude. So the questions for you here we have a leitmotif of how can I connect seemingly different phenomena, seemingly different, and how can we drive meaning from these connections? These are the 2 things we should do constantly in order to develop that attitude. What is common across all my friends? What is common across all my failures? What is common across all the things that I like, all the people I hate, all the experiences I've had, trying to connect things and creating meaning out of these connections? Because once we find a connecting thread, there will be important insight about us hidden in that connecting thread. So this is an attitude that instead of differentiating, instead of breaking things down into constituent elements, it wants to find resemblances, connections across them, federate them, and see a pattern that creates a meaningful similarity across them. This is the first part. I'm going to stop presenting now to see if there is any question from someone on the call, if you want to know something more, if you require some more examples, or it's great if you could also put your cameras on in case you want to talk or ask something. and ask your questions. Otherwise, then you have to listen to me again until I show you one more tool and make another pause to see if you have any other questions. If there is something you would like to know, I would be very happy to answer your questions now about it. Anything, anyone. Also gives me a chance to drink a little bit of tea before we go on again. Okay, we have a comment. Someone is saying it's fascinating. All right, thank you very much for that. Any questions? I hope you connect to the ideas and you find some resonances.
I may have a question.
Sure.
So you have been talking at the beginning of the fact that we are doing compartments, and that is maybe not a good way to, maybe I didn't get it well, but that it's not a good way to do. But at the end of the day, I mean, the world is so complex that I have the feeling that the logical way to do is indeed to do compartments, to simplify things, to have them in boxes, just to be able to analyze a bit what we have around us.
Yeah. Well, none of them is adequate on its own. Neither analysis on its own or synthesis on its own. There has to be a balanced approach, right? To analysis, to inquiry. Too much of over analytical way of looking at things is not good because you lose touch with the bigger context around the ideas. Too much of synthesis is not good. If you want to understand something, you keep zooming out and out and out, and you connect, and suddenly everything is connected to everything, right? So that is how things will become if you do too much of, let's say, synthesis. And if you do too much of analysis, suddenly you know everything about nothing, basically. This is the pitfalls of one-sidedness in any of those, let's say, directions. But my argument is that we need balance. We need to bring these two forces into a balance. Right now, what we're experiencing is that too much of one-sidedness on the direction of analysis, analytical thinking, compartmentalization, and we are basically we are lacking that thread that connects things. So we're losing touch with a bigger picture, a bigger scheme of things. Let me have a look at how to connect various layers of reality. Very good question. It's simple to ask, very difficult to answer that question, definitely. Yeah. I'm going to show you some more ideas. Hopefully there will be something towards that in this presentation that can give you some ideas about this. If not, please ask me again. We have about 30 minutes left. And in these 30 minutes, I want to introduce a couple of more ideas. Some tips to find commonalities. Try them. Start trying. The best tip is to start trying. And do not be somehow discouraged if you can't find, right? Because the idea is not about achieving a result here. Many of us may look at this in a result-oriented way. The idea is to exercise this, is more like flexing a muscle, right? We want to develop our intuitive capacity. So start looking at things. And one other idea is that look at different things to start with. If you're just exposed to one set or one kinds of ideas, right, then you will not be able to find a lot of commonalities because there is not a variety there that you can connect things to. So what I would tell you is that expose yourself to experiences of different nature. Go read novels, look at Japanese gardening, look at football matches from different fields. First of all, you have to have that exposure to this variety, and then you should look at the ways of connecting them in a meaningful way. But the point is doing the exercise and somehow flexing those intuition muscles, other than making sure that what you have found is basically the commonality that is the most meaningful one. So that is how I would go about that. I hope that answered your question to some extent, Melanie. Yes, Andrea, please.
Yes, hello everybody. I wanted to continue on what we just said, flex the muscle, practice. So I have done several certificate courses with Arash, and in the very beginning, I wouldn't think of myself of any person who has a natural gift for what I discovered from Arash, but then this has now been over a year that I'm in. Also, I can say changed my mindset and that I'm flexing this muscle. And today, one of the effects is I can see things that are connected, but another effect is also I find myself much more calm and tolerant as a person, because it could be because things make more sense. And I have also understood I have to take other people how they are. They fit into the system somehow, and I have to look at their function in the system, and the system is always interdependent and interrelated. So this is the basics of system, and it has helped me enormously to make sense of things, but also to come to terms with things and take the system that I am part of as not a threat, but full of wonders and miracles, and that is what Arash has been able to do for me. Really, it's a huge gift, and I want to say thank you.
Thanks a lot, Andrea, for this testimonial. I didn't expect that at all.
No, I just recently realized again what it was that was such a wonder and a miracle that happened to me.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you. So it's just like going with this flow of ideas and exercising that, and suddenly it actually is very good because now it connects us to the next topic. So I'm telling you why and how this thing works. So let's go back to the presentation. I think I can share another technique with you, another idea with you, and then we can do another pause to see if there is something you would like to know more about. So an important part of systems thinking, in my opinion, or thinking in systems is understanding emergences. What is an emergence and why does it matter? If you look at the word system, it has its root in common with some other words like synthesis, synergy, symbol. And in all these cases, there's a number of elements coming together and taking a collective characteristic that transcends the elements. So there is two realities. There is a element level reality at the level of the elements. There's a system level reality. When these elements come together, they create something that cannot be attributed back to the elements, like synergy. A group of people come together, they achieve something none of them can individually achieve. They say a system is more than the sum of its parts, or a team is more than the capacity of its members, and so on and so forth. So there is this transcendence. There is this, we can say, emergence in basically in systems that happens. And it's so important for us to understand this. I think this helps us a lot in explaining a number of important things around us. Now, and a definition of system that I like highlights this emergence. So if we do not have these two layers, we don't have a layer of the elements, we don't have a layer of the system, we do not have a system, basically. It's just a collection of elements, and a collection of elements is not a system. So in a system, we should always have this emergence, which is based on this definition from a book that I would recommend everyone to read, is a system is composed of individual constituents or agents that once aggregated take on collective characteristics that are usually not manifested in nor could easily be predicted from the properties of the individual components themselves. This is very profound. Something happens that you can no longer explain by looking at the elements in a system. That is when you are dealing with a system. I'll give you some examples now. We have the starlings. The starlings, the birds that flock together. You have seen the elegant patterns that they create in the sky. And these patterns that they create is emergent, basically. They don't have an idea to design these patterns. It's just the emergence of the relationships that exists between the single birds and the rules that they follow in terms of choosing their directions or maintaining distance or approaching one another. So it's just three simple rules result in an elegant mode of behavior across the birds. Water as a chemical substance. Water is composed of two gases, basically. None of them have properties of a liquid. But when they come together, they take on a collective characteristic that cannot be attributed back to any of the constituent elements. So we have emergence, basically. Any form in the nature which is a spiral or a fractal, it's emergent. Anything that is a spiral is a result of an emergent, is an emergent behavior resulting from a process. Now, if you go to art, things could be even more interesting, because in my opinion, art is also an emergent process. It's not that you just sit yourself down and say, okay, now I want to create art. When you look at the work that William Blake has done, one of my most favorite poets, the poetry he has written is the result or the emergent behavior of the dialogues that he has had with his inner voices. So there is number of inner voices inside every one of us. And he says 4 mighty ones are in every man. So he identifies 4 of these. A lot of those characters that he has chosen in his poems are actually names he has given to his inner voices. So as a dialogue, as establishing a means of dialogue with the inner voices, somehow understanding them, bang, art is created. So art, in my opinion, by definition, somehow follows this rule. I'll show you more examples. If you go to biblical texts, you can see emergence there as well. When I was reading this, the first thing that came to my mind was an emergent process. You've heard about probably the walls of Jericho, that Joshua wants to penetrate the city of just Jericho, and God shows him how to do so by walking around the city for 7 days, and the last day 7 times, and then they are blowing in their horns, and bang, suddenly the walls crumble down. And this is an emergent process, because what they were doing was not about touching the walls or making a hole into the walls. There was something happening at the level of the elements, which were them marching around it, and then bang, something somewhere else happened. So we can say the same way, a lot of complexes that we have, if you start walking around them and talk to them and engage in a dialogue with them, hear them, give them a mode of expression, then that mode of expression that comes out is an emergent process that can be captured in form of poetry, it can be captured in form of paintings, and so on and so forth. One other example from architecture for emergence. Christopher Alexander talks about a pattern of building which is timeless. He says that a timeless pattern sets us free. This is very nice. So it's not about the pattern anymore. It's not about the room anymore. It's about that emergent behavior that we feel free. We go to a room, we go to a courtyard, we feel free. It says that it prevents when we don't have such a pattern, and the patterns are not like this. They keep us locked in. They prevent us from resulting our conflicting forces, and they keep us in a perpetual state of tension. This is very important. So he says the result of a work of good architecture is that you feel free in that space. Gives the example of 2 rooms. A room in which there's a window place, and then there's chairs that are near that window place. In this case, you can be comfortable, and you can also have your contact with light, because we are visual creatures. We love light deep within us. So being somewhere where there's sun coming in, it invigorates us. At the same time, being able to sit down is also good. He says, now, if you separate this, if you put the chairs in one corner and the windows are in another corner, this keeps you in a perpetual state of conflict. A part of you wants to be comfortable, a part of you wants to be exposed to light. So good work of architecture helps us in resolving in our conflicts, not in generating conflicts within us. A good courtyard is a courtyard in which you go and you just fall asleep. You don't realize how you fell asleep. It somehow releases your tensions and puts you to sleep. This is somehow experiencing emergences in our lives. You know, you watch a movie, for instance, you say, wow, that was an incredible movie. Someone asks you, what was incredible about it? You say, I don't know. The whole thing. It was incredible. It was amazing. So it means that you connected to the movie at the level of the emergence that the movie is creating for you, at the level of the whole, not at the level of the parts. So this is a very important rule for design, that design is about creating those emergencies. But all we talk about in design is the features of a product. We are staying at the level of the product or the service, and less attention is paid about the type of emergencies that happen on the side of the user. Another example of this is a joke, for instance. A joke can only work at the level of the whole. Once you want to, if you crack a joke, someone laughs immediately. That's great. If they don't, no matter how well you explain why that joke is a funny one, you break it down and say, hey, look, there's this paradox here, there's this and there's that. You've lost that. You've lost that chance. So a joke only works when people connect to it at the level of the whole. And laughter is an emergent behavior of the joke. So we are experiencing emergences a lot in our lives. You can see it if, for instance, you look at a painting and it gives you a feeling of serenity and calm. It's because there's a lot of forces in equilibrium, designed in equilibrium in that painting, that also gives you this feeling of resolving your tensions. So understanding these forces, how these elements can come together, and what can result as the net effect of their interrelationships at the systemic level. This is also a very important exercise. And you can see, for instance, here we have different fractal natures, the different fractals in nature. One of these is a work of art. 5 of these are fractals in nature. And as I told you, fractals appear basically as a result of an emerging process. They're not designed like that. So you can see, for instance, the one that is a work of art, which is here, is a painting by Jackson Pollock, is also following the same fractal idea that exists in nature. So we can say that art in that way becomes an extension of the nature somehow. Now, the question is that, what emergences do we experience on a daily basis? First of all, keeping an eye out for understanding emergences. What is it that we connect to at the level of emergence? My example is the guitar I have right behind me. I love the instrument. I carry it with me anywhere I go. Now I'm in the mountains, in a chalet, I have it with me here. And I put it in my background because I like to look at it when I'm teaching, and it's just something that I really like. Why do I like it? I can't say why. I can't say what's special about this instrument. Is it the year it was built? Is it the weight? Is it the fretboard? Is it the material? Is it the pickups? What is it? I don't know. But what I know is that when I pick it up, I can't put it down. So I connect to this instrument, not at the level of its features, but at an emergent level. My relationship with this is really built at a systemic level. I pick it up, I can't put it down. This just shows that I connect to the instrument at the level of the whole. And this probably shows that those who created this instrument were following some rules when they were making it, so that if these basically systemic effects are experienced. And this also goes to the conversation we just had about finding commonalities. How do we do that? The fact that you try to do them, it's going to result result in the fact that they appear, they emerge after a while. After a while, you see, wow, something has changed. I give the example of in chess, when a pawn goes across the chessboard, it can become something bigger than a pawn. It can become a queen, right? And it takes one step at a time, apart from the first move, you know? But suddenly all these small steps, they result in something which is bigger, right? And makes that pawn something. That's also emergence in a game that we experience it. And one thing we should learn is that when we are thinking about learning things, developing our skills, sometimes these skills need to be developed in an emergent way. Like if it's about leadership, for instance, leadership cannot be learned through a set of PowerPoint slides. It needs to be designed for emergence. It needs to put you in a set of situation exercises through which you gain experiences. By reflection on those experiences, you could enhance your basically your leadership skills. So a lot of the skills that we're trying to build directly in education cannot be built directly. They should be designed for emergence. So this shows a lot. This, in my opinion, understanding emergences can change a lot about how we structure educational experiences for individuals. You know, it can have very important, in my opinion, implications in education, important implications in designing things, how we design things, especially services, how we allow for these emergencies to appear and to surface, not to kill the richness that is actually there in the inherently possible and accessible in the users and in the designers as well. So these are some ideas. I think it's a good place for me to stop now and to ask you to see if you have any questions you would like to ask. And then that will be it. That's our very short masterclass. And basically, if you want to learn more about these topics, you can follow some of my posts on LinkedIn. I'm also I've started a series of trainings under the name Design Dissolve for designers. I can probably show you slide with the information there. So you can go to the website and see if there is a training there that you would like to follow. So this is basically a training course that I've put together, which is about exploring and expanding our human potential. It's all about that. How can we explore and expand our human potential? I'm doing this in collaboration with a university in Switzerland, and it's composed of different modules. There's a systems thinking module, which explores different modes of thinking, not analytical only. There is a design beyond thinking module, which helps us connecting to our other functions, which are not thinking only, it's feeling and intuition in particular. And it's also a creativity and imagination module that can help us become more creative by connecting to our unconscious forces. So I started this year, and it's been an amazing journey. We've had basically people from 20 countries so far, from all 6 continents. Very incredible group of participants always gather. We have small, basically very small cohort sizes, 10 people maximum, in order to design for emergencies that can happen inside the groups, and people can learn more and more about them. So yeah, well, 2 questions here. One is about designing emergencies in education, and one is about understanding more in sustainability, I think, in environmental studies, if I'm not made to apply solving, social environmental problems. I would say, if you want to, sustainability for me is nothing but understanding behavior over time. And sustainability is the language of relationships. So we need to be able to understand relationships. That's something that we cannot, that's the source of all problems that we have. We do not understand relationships. The way we think is fundamentally different from the way the nature works. And we do not understand. And that mode of thinking is kept being applied. So the thinking is not revised, is not refined, is not questioned. So we try to solve the issues of sustainability through an analytical mindset. We need to recalibrate our thinking and somehow embrace connectivity and basically all these important dimensions that we spoke about today. In education, in education, I have a number of, when you talk about designing for emergences, we are talking about heuristics, basically. We're working with a set of heuristics because, like the story of the walls of Joshua, people walk around the wall and blow their horn, and suddenly the wall comes down. There is no logical relationship between what you're doing and what happens at the end. So we're talking about some hypothetical heuristics that you can apply to see, yes, I have a bunch of them, being a teacher for over 20 years now. For instance, one thing I know, if I do not learn in a course alongside my students, that course is not going to create a magic. So that is one thing I have learned. If I do not allow some space for improvisation in my courses, if I do not allow students to bring topics, if the course sizes are not small enough to give everyone the opportunity to express themselves, then I have killed a lot of richness in that course. If I'm not challenged in that course as much as the students are challenged, right? That is not going to create a magic. And sometimes I've seen these things very clearly, but I don't know how to explain it, basically, because me being challenged, creating something out there for the students, I cannot connect them, but they are connected in a different plane. And one thing I've always seen in courses that I'm teaching is that there's incredible patterns of intimacy that generated between the individuals. I'd never designed for that to happen as a teacher. For me, it's about the course, some ideas. But then what always happens, there is people growing closer to one another. They stay in touch after the course. They want to continue, do more stuff together. So this also shows, this is the elements of the magic that I told you about. People say that, we look forward to the weekly sessions that we have. This is something, I don't know how to design for it directly, but it's some of the attributes of that magical space that I told you about. So this is a world of experiments, heuristics, and esoteric ideas, seemingly esoteric ideas that you cannot put one to one together. I do this, therefore I expect that much of results. You need to embrace a world of uncertainty and jump into that world with some ideas and the courage to test those ideas, basically. This is what I would say about understanding emergences. There is a question from Ismail, which is early in your call, I mentioned complex adaptive system. Could you maybe tell more about that? A general overview, could you enlighten the term design beyond thinking? Yeah, sure. Complex adaptive system is that, if when the system sets its own purposes and goals. So sometimes a system has a goal, the system chooses how to approach the goal, but this is not enough. A complex adaptive system, the goal evolves and changes. Anything that has a human in it at any level is a complex adaptive system because human beings change, right? Evolve. And their goals, their purposes also evolve, that it manifests, or one purpose manifests in different ways. So that's a complex and adaptive system. It adapts to environments. What is design beyond thinking? Because, as I told you, this mindset of analysis is prevalent everywhere. And we say design thinking. Thinking is not enough for designing. You need to engage your full human potential when it comes to design, which is not only thinking. Thinking is one of the 4 functions. You need to engage your intuition, you need to engage your feelings, and our feeling, our intuition are things that cannot be rendered algorithmically. Robots and algorithms, they can never do that. AI can never do that. These are the things that make us human. But when it comes to thinking, and especially thinking analytically, computers and machines can do a much better job compared to human beings. So now in design thinking, we call it design thinking, which in my opinion is flawed from the outset. it should be designed beyond thinking. It should be a way of integrating different functions. So I know there is Reda who has asked also a question. How do you see systems thinking in a world currency focused on risk management, compliance, short term? Yeah, there is a whole mismatch, because we just want to achieve things in a short term, and on different fronts, not only in business, individually as well. People want to get things quickly done. They're looking for templates they can fill out in 2 minutes, in 5 minutes. So there is this hyper tension towards achieving fast results. People do not learn for the sake of learning anymore. Just learn something for the sake of learning it without looking for an immediate application of it. So there is a prevalence of this attitude, unfortunately, that we have forgotten about investments in things and being more patient, holding the tension between what we want to achieve, where we are and where we want to be, which our business world is all about. That when you are focusing on quarterly, let's say, results for the shareholders, nothing long term could make any sense. When people want to do a degree in a year, nothing long term or fundamental makes any sense. So unfortunately, we are caught in that hypertension of speed and superficiality, I would say, which is the result of what we are living in right now. What we are experiencing there is also a result of this. I know we have only 1 minute left, so Antoine is posting something about the next master classes. The next one are starting very soon. So I thank you very much for being here with me. In the hour that I had, I tried to somehow familiarize you with this attitude of thinking in systems. I hope some of the ideas resonated. I hope you found it useful, and I hope I can see you at some point in some of the courses I give in future, or in other master classes, or basically the webinars that I run. Follow me on LinkedIn. I'll follow you back, and this way we can stay in touch. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day. Take care of yourselves. Keep safe, and till later. Bye-bye.